Dude, I so appreciate you being on here today, and it's just it's always good to see you and good
Same
to
here.
chat with you. And just to let the audience know, Sanford and I go back. Is that
Definitely.
accurate? We go
Yeah.
back. So, how many years have we known each other?
Oh man, since we were in sixth grade, like in the sixth grade year. Gosh, I think I was 11.
Ooh,
Yeah,
so
11 years
that's
old.
yeah. So that was let's see, 45
Yeah,
years.
yeah,
Man, 45
long time,
years is amazing. We're still here
long
doing it
time.
though, so
Yeah.
it's great. And I just like I mentioned to you earlier, Sanford, I was going to make a recording about a week or so ago, and I was gonna mention a couple of things that we talked about before, and then
Hmm.
I said, that's Sanford's story actually, and I'm not gonna do it justice. And I think that people would really benefit from hearing your backstory, the origin story. And it's so cool to me because I've seen it from for 45 years, and I think there's so much knowledge there and experience that you can share and wisdom. And I know for sure there's one person listening to this that really needs it like right now, and then other people will use some of these tools and things we talk about in the future to help themselves. So
Okay.
that's what it's all about, man. And I sure definitely have really admired what you've been able to accomplish, and on a professional side, and then more importantly, on the domestic side with your children, your spouse, your grandchildren. That's to me is even more important than being professionally successful. And so for you to be able to pull both off is really a great feat, and so I definitely admire you for that. And
Thank you.
also, it shows it can be done. And
Yeah.
if if it can be done, then that means there's a path and a way to do it. And if we can just give people just a few breadcrumbs and some nuggets that they can follow along their path, I think it'll be so beneficial, man. So let's just dive in. I'm so anxious for people to hear, and so I want to talk about what people see first, right? What people see,
Hmm.
because people go off of that and then they assume that, oh man, Sanford's such a lucky man because you have. So talk about your family.
Well, it all started with my wife, Karen, and Karen and I met shortly after my high school graduation, and we met on a blind date set up through my cousin. And actually, it's funny. The first time that I ever spoke to her before ever seeing her, you were actually over at my house. You and Richard and Tony, we were all sitting around in the basement. I think we were either playing dominoes or cards or something. And the phone rings, and my parents. I think my parents were out of town, and I had the house to myself, and phone rang. And back at that time, we didn't have caller ID, so you had to answer the phone and talk to somebody to see who it was.
Yeah.
And I remember telling all you guys, hold on just a minute, let me go grab the phone. And I answered the phone, and uh, my cousin had called about an hour or two earlier before you guys had showed up. And my cousin Rhonda, she used to always bug me about going to church, and just used to get on my nerves all the time, man. And this particular time, she called and she was like, "Hey, don't hang up, don't hang up. Uh, if I have this girl call you, will you talk to her?" And I'm like, "Okay, Rhonda, sure, whatever." Just trying to get her off the phone. And so by the time you guys had showed up, and we're all just sitting around having fun, and I'd forgotten about it, honestly. So when the phone rang, I answered the phone. I'm like, "Hello," and this voice on the other end of the phone says, "Mm-hmm." I thought, what in the world? It's and I can't look at the screen and see who it is because we didn't have the screen, just had numbers on the phone. And so I'm like, and then it dawned on me, oh, Rhonda said this girl named Karen was going to call. And so I said, is this Karen? She said, mm-hmm. Wow. All right. Real talker. Okay. I said, so you're a friend of Rhonda's? Mm-hmm. And the whole time, there's music playing in the background. Y'all sitting around laughing, talking and stuff. And so I said, I finally told her, I said, well, let me, can I get your number and call you back later? I got some friends over right now. And she gave me her number, and I called her back, and we talked for a few days, on the phone, just back and forth, before I finally asked her out on a date. And, the rest is history. The crazy part about it was, out in our neighborhood where we live, we were, middle-class kids and at that time, and all our parents were just hardworking people, man. Your dad and my dad both worked at General Motors, and my mom worked your mom worked at the post office, and my mom worked for the phone company. And so we're all out, just trying to make it, just trying to get by, trying to do better in life. And one thing my mother used to always tell me was, I don't want you hooking up with none of them girls from the city. Don't you be bringing none of them ghetto girls up in my house. I want you to find you a nice girl up here in Johnson County. I'm like, oh, okay, Mom. And, we had moved from the inner city, and we had moved to the suburbs. And so, my family was like, don't want you to look back. I want you to move forward with what we got, the plan for you and everything. And so we still own our old house that we used to live in the city. And one of my older brothers lived in the house. And so when we would go to church on Sundays, my mother was a huge Chiefs fan. And she would, we would get out of church. Our church was in our old neighborhood in Kansas City, Kansas. And so when we get out of church, we would rush over to my brother's house to catch the first half of the Chiefs game. And then during halftime, we would rush back out to Olathe so we could catch the second half, at home. And I remember one time, the people that used to live next door to us at our old house had moved away. And it was an older couple, and one of the husband had died, and the wife had moved back to Mississippi. And so there were new people living in the house next door. And I remember my mom asking my sister-in-law, hey, how's your new neighbors? And she said, oh my goodness, those people, they just be, she said, every morning you can hear them praying all loud. And the houses were real close together. The only thing separated the houses was the driveway. This one little narrow driveway for one car. It wasn't even a 2-car driveway. And so you could hear people, if they were loud, you could hear them real easy from our house. And she said, they'd be praying in those tongues and praying all loud, and just gets on my nerves. And my mother was like, oh yeah, you got to watch out for those folks. Those people are crazy. They put that stuff on you. They put that water on you and stuff. You stay away from them. And so when I had set up the date with Karen, it was all set up through my cousin Rhonda. And so I talked to Karen, and I'd gotten her address and got the directions. Back then, no GPS, no Google, no internet. It was just, everything was written by hand. So I wrote down the directions on how to get to her house from my house. And so as I'm driving, and I'm following the directions, and I'm looking at the paper, and I'm like, okay, all right, here's the exit. All right, here's the street. All right, now I need to turn left on Lathrop. I'm like, wow, this is my old neighborhood. I know these streets. Okay, now I need to turn right on 22nd. I'm like, wait a minute. I used to live on 22nd. And then, so I started pulling down, and her address was 3052 North 22nd. And then it dawned on me, my address was 3050 North 22nd. It never even crossed my mind until I pull up in front of the house. I'm like 20 feet away from the house. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. That's the address next to our old house. Then I see my brother's house, and I see her house, and I'm like, oh no. Oh, it's those crazy people my sister-in-law were talking about. And so my first instinct was to pull off. Just hurry up and get away. But my cousin Rhonda was standing on the porch with this little girl. And come to find out, she was standing on the porch with Karen. And I couldn't pull off. So I had to go ahead and go through with the date. Man, I could just hear my mother in the background, just, like those little thought bubbles in your head, I could just hear my mother saying, those people are crazy. They'll put that stuff on you. You stay away from them. Don't you bring no ghetto girl to my house. But man, we went on a date, and it was, the rest was history. My mom fell in love with her, and, because my mother had 6 boys, she didn't have any daughters. And so this was like the daughter, this is going to be like her little protege. This is the daughter that she never had, she could just raise her up from a young pup. Because all my older brothers had met girls that were older, so it worked out, and we're still together today, 34 years later, 2 kids, 6 grandkids, and, life is good.
That's awesome. So tell me, tell the folks tell them about your children. How do they make their living?
Well, I work in television production, and do producing and editing and for different television networks. And my son, Christopher, works in the same industry as I do, and he does really well. Had a guy come up to me yesterday and said, man, I had no idea Chris Robinson was your son. Man, I love working with that dude. He's great. So, it makes you feel good to hear that you were at least a part of raising kids right. And so he does really well, and has a great reputation in the industry. And my daughter, she's an attorney, and she does really well in her practice. She started out at the district attorney's office in Houston, and now she has her own practice, and she's looking towards just building on that. And they're both married. My son married a great girl, and my daughter married a great guy. And, both of them, my son has three kids, and my daughter has 3 kids. So they're doing good.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that you work in the television industry, and so I want the audience to know that that's severely understated what he said. So I just want you to I want the big events, man. I know it's in sports, and so I want the big events that you've worked in your career.
Super Bowl every year, just about every year. NBA Finals, World Series, Stanley Cup Finals, the Olympics twice. Let me see. I've won an Emmy Award for the work that I did at the Olympics in Greece, in Athens, Greece. And I worked the Olympics in Rio. I worked Pan Am Games in Rio. I've worked on a few entertainment projects as well. Done concerts. Worked on a documentary film crew in Africa on racial reconciliation, of all things. So yeah, it varies,
Now, don't forget about the race fans. I think you've done some things with the racing community.
Oh yeah. It's funny. When I was, like I said, I spent half my childhood in the inner city and half my childhood in the suburbs. And when I was in the inner city, man, I think I may have been about 5, 6 years old. I was the only kid in the hood that was a NASCAR fan. I mean, only one. I was a minority amongst all black people. I was the only one that was a NASCAR fan. Man, I was such a big fan that I used to get. My mother had ordered me a Auto Racing Digest, so I used to get a magazine every month about all the different racers. And man, I wanted to be Richard Petty so bad. Well, I would get on my big wheel. I'd ride around the neighborhood, put my little 43 on the side of my big wheel with tape, And man, I love NASCAR, and so I ended up. I had the opportunity and was blessed to be able to work NASCAR for several years, for over a decade, and it was a lot of fun. I think it was one of the highlights of my career was when I was able to meet Richard Petty, and I mean, the king. It was amazing, and got to be really good friends with his son Kyle, and it was cool. So yeah, that was a different experience for me. This was back before Bubba Wallace came around and made it cool. I was always only black guy on the crew, and I spent most of my time in the TV truck. You didn't see me out walking around the track or hanging out in the infield partying with everybody. I was just in the truck working. And back to the hotel. That was it.
That's amazing. So Daytona 500, mini Winston Cup back then. Now it's FedEx Cup, I think. Winston Cup.
Yeah.
And then, do you work Indy 500?
Yep. Had a chance to work the Indy 500. I used to watch that on television all the time, man, and finally had a chance to work that. So, yeah.
So like I said to the listeners earlier, severely understated. So if it's a big deal in sports, Sanford has worked it. So that's amazing. And I remember I had a brother-in-law I used to tease about NASCAR all the time. I was driving in circles. They're not athletes. And I was just teasing them. I was teasing them. And I remember one time I got the opportunity to race those go-karts at work. And I couldn't wait, man. I want to run you guys off the road. And man, I got in that go-kart, man. I can't do it. I can't pull those G's. I couldn't make the turns. I was car sick. I was driving. And I couldn't do it. I was like, okay, these guys, this is for real out here. And I'm driving. I was probably driving 40. They're driving 200. It was a little bit of a difference. But I remember you getting us some tickets one time when they came to Kansas City, the Speedway, and you gave us me and a buddy. You gave us pit passes and the whole thing. So I was like, well, there's nothing to do, man. Let's go out here and check it out. If we don't like it, we can always leave. He's like, yeah, okay. So we get out there, and it's such a fan-friendly environment. It's unbelievable to go out in the cold pit and look around and get, I got 12 inches from the cars. They're going to be driving here in a couple of hours. And we get across the track, and about time to start the race. And my buddy's like, yeah, if this is boring, we'll just leave, just going in circles. Okay. Man, they come by the first time by, they drop the flag, and those engines come up to speed. It is, I was hooked immediately. Unbelievable. I still get chills thinking about it. There's nothing like that. And television as hard as you try, you just can't do it justice. People got to go and see a live race. You'll be hooked. And I always tell people, you never been to a race? I said, well, watch one lap. If you're not happy, leave. And they always come back like this. They're driving this close, 200 miles an hour out there, driving this close. It's crazy. I said, well, guy spin out. And I was like, oh, he's done. He spun out. He's shook up. He's going in. Back. What? You racing again? Yeah. Incredible.